Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you'd like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today, my guest is Mark Struczewski. How you doing, Mark?
I am doing fantastic, Judy. How you doing?
I'm doing very good, thanks. I thought it might be an interesting conversation today to talk about productivity, but specifically how it relates to leadership.
I don't know anything about productivity. What gave you that idea?
And there I was thinking you were the expert.
Well, they call me Mr. Productivity, so I guess I know a little bit about productivity. Not much, but enough to keep me out of the trouble, I guess.
So why do they call you that, though?
Well, Mr. Productivity was a name that was given to me by Jeff Young on LinkedIn. Him and I have been friends for, following each other at least, but I don't think we'd say friends. We've been connected for a couple of years, and I post all the time about how to be more productive. And he says, you should use hashtag Mr. Productivity. And I'm like, I should call myself Mr. Productivity. And that's why I got the domain name, MrProductivity.com. So it all comes full circle. So it wasn't a name, because I guess the best nicknames are names people give you, not the ones you create yourself. So Mr. Productivity is not what I call myself. It's what a name someone else gave it to me. It just stuck.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. And I certainly agree that it's much better if somebody names you, as long as you like the name.
Yes.
Otherwise, it could cause some problems. So, based on that, then, what do you think the link is with leadership?
Well, I think a lot of people don't stop and think that, leadership has a big role when it comes to productivity. I actually did a recent episode of my podcast about this. When you are a leader, the onus on your employees' productivity is on you. Yes, the employee has to practice adulting. They have to be a grown-up. They have to do their job. But you, as the leader, need to set them up for productive success. A lot of leaders have a hands-off approach that I've seen, and you need to be involved. And now, how do you get involved? Is you need to ask the people on the front lines doing the work, hey, listen, do you have what you need to do your job? Do you know how to use the program, the software, the tool, whatever the case may be? A lot of people make the mistake, and I see this all the time. The company goes out and buys the new software, and it's usually the C-suite and the IT department and the vendors all talking, and they pick a software and they give it to the company and say, okay, guys, learn how to use this. When they should have done, in my opinion, is go to the frontline people who are going to use the software day in and day out and say to them, hey, let me ask you, what do you think of the software? Invite them into the meetings, because they may say, you know what, this is going to slow me down, which is going to affect my productivity, which is going to affect the bottom line of the company. And I encourage people to always involve the people on the front lines before you get software installed in your company.
Yeah, I think it surprises every maverick anywhere when people, especially leaders, trying to propose to do something without actually thinking through the consequences and the logical steps before they try. And I think what you were saying in terms of software is universally true. No one ever seems to ask the end users whether it will work or not.
I remember when I worked at a local hospital here in Houston, Texas, and we had a software that it worked fine, and I was an inventory control coordinator, and it worked fine, but then they wanted to upgrade, and so they made the mistake I just talked about. They had the IT people, the vendors, and the C-suite people make the decision, and then they said, hey, here's your new software, and I'm like, the learning curve took so long, even though we went through training, because it was black and white. It was totally different than the other one, which did the job, and I'm like, why did we change? Did we change because this one's got another name? Or if it's prettier, or why did we change? And of course, they never tell you the answer, but they never involve people on the front lines and says, hey, what do you think about this? It was so confusing to use. It actually slowed me down, and it actually made me a less productive employee.
Yes, that is entirely common. So if you were going back there now, what would you have said to the leader? What are the things they would have needed to do to make it more productive?
Well, if they, by some miracle, called me up and says, hey, we'd like you to come in and talk to us about productivity. And yeah, we know we fired you back in July of 2005, but we'd like you to come in and talk about this. And I'd say, well, first of all, let's go back to 2003, 2002. Remember that software you guys got and you never involved the frontline people? You can't make that mistake again. I know you guys went to college and you have all kinds of degrees and stuff, but you're not going to be using the software on a day-to-day basis. You need to bring in the people in every department, one member from every department in the hospital, maybe one from nursing and one from inventory control and one from physicians, and say, hey, take a demo of the software. What do you like about it? They go, oh my gosh, this is so confusing. That should be a clue. If they can't get in there and intuitively see, I believe the best software, Judy, is nobody should have to teach you how to use software. If you're going to say, like, you're going to add a new item to your inventory, you should be able to go to the inventory module and go, okay, maybe I hit this plus. Oh, add a new item. It should be intuitive. I remember I had to go through so many hours of training on the software we have. And I still didn't understand what to do. It was so confusing. It wasn't intuitive. It was so different. Had the company involved the frontline employees and said, what do you think about this? And they listened. That's the second part. You have to ask them in on the meetings, and you have to listen to what they say. And they would have said, oh, this is ugly. This is horrible. Then they probably would have said, no, we're not going to go with the software. But they didn't do that. They just made a decision because the IT department thought it was nice. The C-suite people thought it was nice. The vendor, of course, was all excited because they got to sell the software. And meanwhile, the people who had to use it hated it.
Okay, that's really helpful, Mark. So is there a common rules for productivity? Is there something, a common thread that would work through any kind of productivity task?
Yes. You need to be proactive. A lot of people operate their days in reactive mode. What I mean by reactive mode is they have no plan whatsoever. Mm-hmm. They just show up and whatever's thrown at them, they handle. Now, even if you work for a corporation, you can still be productive. You can be proactive. And here's what I tell people to do. When you go to work, I don't care what your role is. You could be a secretary. You could be in sales. You could be the person that greets people at the door. You walk into work and you take the mindset that you are the CEO, that you are the big enchilada, the big cheese, the big guy or big woman. And you have that mindset. A lot of people I see, Jude, they walk in and they go, you know what? I'm just going to put my hours in, and I'm going to go to my breaks, and I'm going to take my lunches, and I'm going to leave at 5 o'clock, and I don't really care if the place burns down when I leave. Well, if you have that kind of attitude, if you have that kind of mentality, how productive, how good of an employee are you going to be? But if you show up as like, I'm the CEO, and everything I do today really impacts the bottom line of my company and affects my payroll and it affects my stock options or whatever the case may be, your mindset is going to be different and you're going to work harder and more productively than if you didn't.
Yeah, and what do you think a leader needs to do to make sure the staff are as engaged as that?
Listen to them. Talk to them. There was a CEO of Chrysler not too long ago, maybe 25, 30 years ago, Lee Iacocca. And unlike most CEOs who have the parking spot right next to the front door, their own shrine is usually covered and decorated with daisies and daffodils, and they walk in the office and no one talks to them the whole day. Well, Lee Iacocca used to park in the Union parking lot and walk through the factory. I think leaders need to do that. They need to spend less time in meetings, less time in their office, and they need to spend more time talking to the people who are actually working. Yes, they're the leader of the ship. They're the captain, but you need to go out there and talk to the people and find out what is preventing you from getting your job done. What are the roadblocks? What are the barriers? So many people, they just sit in their office. They got their nice mahogany desk or their oak desk and their gorgeous office, and they have a secretary and all this stuff, but they're not in touch with the people who are working for them. And I don't care if you have 3 employees or 30,000 employees. You should make it a point once or twice a week to walk out and talk to a few employees, maybe take them out to lunch and say, hey, listen, anything you tell me at this lunch is between you and me. I don't care if you're a negative comment. It's not going to affect your job. what do you think about the job? What do you think about the company? And if you really listen to your employees, you're going to start really learning, wow, if we make these small 3 changes over here, it's going to dramatically affect the ROI, the bottom line, the productivity of my company. But most leaders don't do that. They sit in their office, they make themselves so busy with all their other stuff, they're not really listening to what's going on in their own company.
Yeah, I agree. And it can also be that the message that they give out isn't congruent. I remember years and years and years ago working in an organisation, and they were always talking about how it's an environment where everybody are all colleagues. You know, there's no manager and and staff, and how the big guy, the guy in charge who owns the company, he sits in an open plan office with everybody else, and it was this big thing. And I remember going to head office, and you're walking around, and everybody has this open plan office, and everyone's the same. And then you went up to the top floor where this guy who sat there, and yes, he had an open plan office, and yes, he shared it. But when you walked into that room, he had the biggest wooden mahogany desk with the amount of walls and stuff around. And everybody else had the basic, like a basic.
Yep.
Basic office furniture, like the swivel seats and everything. And he had this proper armchair. And it was just like, oh, that's where he sits, is it? And it was just so funny because the whole company was set up about everybody's the same. That was like its values. It was like, that is what they stated. And yet, and on his floor, it had piped music. It was just like, you're kidding me. It was just so funny. And it was just like, nobody on that floor could understand why it didn't make any sense. They couldn't understand why people were like, this isn't what we're about, is it? And it's like, this is our values. Look at us, his open plan office. He's like, yeah, but his desk takes up half the room. Like it was, like you have a square. It was literally from one side of the wall to the other was his space. And everybody else had the standard, 1 meter desk or something. And his must have been like 4 meters or like 2 meters wide. It was just mad. It was just mad. But yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things is that you can learn a lot about things not to do when you see other leaders, can't you? Like, if I ever get to that position, I will not act like that.
Yeah, I often tell people that if I was named the CEO of Walt Disney World, which I love, or Apple, which I love, I would be very rarely in my office. I would be walking around. My executive assistant would be trailing around with me with a notepad, and I would be walking around talking to people and say, write this down, make this change, because I know that the only way you're going to know what your employees want, need, their barriers, their challenges, is going out and talking to them. They are, like you said, the guy who had the throne on the upper floor. People are going to come up to them and say, hey, I got an issue with someone down on the first floor. They're going to be intimidated. So you, as the leader, have to go to your employees and you have to say, hey, let me take you out to lunch and you tell me what's really going on. That's when you have the pulse of your company. If you just hide all day in your mighty throne room, no one's going to come and tell you what's really going on. I heard a story way back, back in when Hitler was, in prominence. People knew that you only brought him good news because you'd be killed otherwise. And a lot of leaders have this mentality: don't tell me anything unless it's good news. So people don't tell you the bad news, and all of a sudden the company, goes out of business. And the leader's like, well, what happened? Well, you didn't want to hear the bad news, so we didn't tell you. And that's the kind of environment you create when you don't want an open dialogue. And you can't be in your throne room and say you have an open dialogue. You have to go to the people in their 1 meter desk.
Exactly. And I think that's why mavericks stand up and shout so often. And they say, it's like, no, this is not working. And I think that's why it can be very hazardous to a socialized maverick who wants to do what's good for the company, but he's seen as unnecessarily challenging because they stand up and say, well, like me, everybody else is going, oh, how wonderful it is. And I'm standing there at 20 something going, no, this doesn't look right. They're like, shh. I go, no, this doesn't work. But yeah, I thought that was quite amusing. I've got a question for you, actually. With Generation Z, so they're about 24-ish now, and then they got the latter millennials in the workplace who are expecting tech all the time. How do you think, I mean, would a company be silly, or would they be innovative to allow these individuals to have Facebook and other social media platforms so prominent in the workplace as they're working? I mean, would that affect productivity in a negative way or a positive way?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because let's face it, you're not going to keep people off of social media. Everyone has their phones with them. I remember when I first started working back in 1979, I believe it was, if I remember correctly. We didn't have cell phones, didn't have the internet. Now you walk in the local supermarket and everybody's on their phones, and they're running into things. People are going to be on social media. So instead of fighting it, I would say, listen, you can be on social media on your breaks, not your lunches, and you can have access to it on the company servers and stuff like that. But you need to find a way to control it, because unless their job is to be on social media, if they've got to be doing Excel spreadsheets or writing sales letters or making sales calls, obviously you don't want them on social media, because a lot of people don't stop and think is social media is designed to keep you on the platform until you die. That's why you have endless scrolling. I mean, it's never going to end. I even have a video on my website, a free video that your listeners can go check it. They go to mrproductivity.com. It's 5 strategies for controlling social media. It's 11-minute video. And you need to be the boss of social media. And most of the people I'm sure listening to this episode are going to be adults, and you need to control it. Mark Zuckerberg is not going to come to your house and punch you in the nose if you're not on Facebook every day. So you need to scale back and say, okay, I'm at work. I'm going to do my job now. And I hate to break it to the listener, but you're not that important. Okay. Nothing is that important. If it's that important, I tell people, if it's that important, don't email me. Don't send me a DM. Knock on my door if my house is on fire. Okay. Most people, and this is like 99% of the people in the world, they can wait to check into Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, whatever the case may be. They don't need to know the instant. See, you remember back in the day, if there was a tragic accident someplace in the world, you had to wait till the evening news. Now, within 30 seconds, as soon as the plane crashes, it's all over Twitter and pictures. And it's like, really, do you really need to know the moment something happens in the world? And people are so sucked into that, because there's a million apps out there that you can know instantly when something happens. And I'm like, how did we survive back in the 60s and 70s and 80s when you had to wait for it to come out in the news? We made it okay. We survived. And I think people really think they need to know everything as soon as it happens. I'm like, why? And no one can give me an answer.
And I think the problem with as well is knowing when something just happens, nobody actually really knows what's happened. So it's all this speculation. And then there's people, especially those that aren't mavericks, don't really consider what it is that they're listening to. So they just go with the flow, and there's no objectivity. There's no, hang on a second, let's just see, did that crash happen because it was a bomb, because the driver was asleep, because, or is it, it's that kind of, as soon as something happens, it's terror. Oh, actually, no, it wasn't terror. That guy fell asleep at the wheel, but by that point, it's really gone around the world 4 times and everyone's really stressed out. And it's literally, you find out the answer maybe 2 hours later.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? So, you just kind of sometimes just waiting to find out what the actual facts are.
But the thing is, does it move the needle towards your daily, weekly, quarterly, and yearly goals? Knowing that something happened at 3:01 p.m. as opposed to you finding out about it at 6 o'clock, does it really affect your journey toward whatever goal you're achieving? And the answer, more than likely not, is no. It's just that we are so obsessed, we are so addicted to finding out what's going on the moment it happens, and not, we don't want to wait. Oh, I can't 3 minutes later. That's old news. I'm like, are you serious right now? And we just need to realize, hey, we have to focus on what we need to work on, and then we need to go and worry about the other things. If we even get back to it, maybe we don't think it's that important to be watching news that make us feel sad and blue and angry.
I think that's very interesting, because I find that myself, I need regular social media breaks, because you can get caught up in a narrative if you're not too careful.
Yep.
And you can end up having your mood affected unnecessarily, whether it's deliberately manipulated or whether the algorithms are just feeding you the same stuff.
Yes.
And it can be quite dangerous if you don't stop and go, wait now, where did that come from? You know, and then you go, oh, actually, that's not a very good verifiable source.
Right.
Maybe I shouldn't get so upset about that.
Well, I tell people that the number one thing you need to do is you need to turn off all your social media notifications, because when you open the app, everything's going to be there anyway. So turn them off to begin with. And number two, limit the time you're on social media. Now, every phone has a timer on it. So if you want to go on social media for 30 minutes, set yourself a timer and don't get something like really soft harp music. What I want you to do instead, I want you to get something that really annoying, and then when the timer goes off, you go back to your job, because you're going to check in on social media anyways. But the thing is, you got to have boundaries. If you don't have boundaries, it's going to be endless.
Yeah, and I think that's probably something we need to actively teach, probably.
Yes.
Than just and I think that's probably the difference in the workplace, isn't it? Because older generations don't think it's necessary to teach it because we come at it from a slower pace.
Yes.
You know, so we understand about spam and phishing because we gradually got introduced to it, whereas younger people don't necessarily, because it's all they've grown up with. Just check Google, you know, rather than yeah, but that's not the first website that you see is the right answer. You know, I remember having to go and, you know, go to a library and look at the encyclopedias and get out 7 or 8 different books to find the 2-3 paragraphs that would give you the information for me to use my own brain and work out what I was going to write in an essay.
Yep, I remember those days.
As opposed to going, oh, I found one website which has the same essay question on it, and I can just copy some of it and it'll be all right. Yeah, so it's quite funny. I was wondering, is there a specific mindset to be more productive, or do we need to be that intentional with it?
A specific mindset. Well, you've got to have an attitude that, number one, you can't do everything. Mm-hmm. Okay, you can't do everything. But I always tell people, complexity is the gateway to procrastination. Simplicity is the gateway to simplicity. So what I mean by that is, don't make things any more complicated than they need to be. So many people wear a badge of honor. They created something that's so complicated. I'm like, why is it so complicated? It should be so simple. Remember, we were talking about the software earlier in the program.
Yeah.
You need to make it really simple. And I think when you go in there and you make it simple, then everyone is going to use the software or going to use the app, whatever the case might be. They're going to really naturally gravitate toward it. Everyone's going to be happy, and that's what you want. And so I think if you're not doing what you love to do, where you love to do it, which is one of the big things I say, you need to go find something else, because what's going to happen is you're going to try to do something and it's not a right fit for you. And so what's going to happen is you're going to try to push a rope. You're going to try to put the square peg in the round hole, and it's not going to work. So in order for you to be the most productive version of yourself, you need to go do something that you love to do, where you love to do it. So you may have to change jobs. You may have to go out on your own. But if you love your job, but you hate your boss, or you hate the color of the paint, or you hate the commute, you're never going to be the most productive version of yourself until you correct that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if you're a leader or a manager and you have a member of staff that is just not working productively, what would you suggest they should do to improve that?
Well, first thing you do is, like I alluded to earlier, you need to sit down and talk with the employee, and not in a group setting, not in a weekly meeting. You just bring them in your office, or better yet, take them someplace neutral, like off to lunch someplace, and just say, listen, we noticed there's been problems with your performance. Is there something going on we should know about? Maybe something at home? Are you dealing with an illness? Did you lose a loved one? What's going on? Because a lot of problems with productivity are because of something going on at home, and they bring it to work, and the leader doesn't sit down and say, okay, what's going on here? How can I help? They just immediately assume that the employee is a slouch and lazy and doesn't care, but they may have some other issues going on. And I encourage the leader to go talk to the employee and find out what's going on.
Yes, and I think to be able to do that well, you would have had to establish a relationship before that.
Yes.
Where you come in and saying, Mark, how are you feeling today? It doesn't sound like you're going, Jude, something weird's happening. You're going to sack me or something, because it's like an unusual thing, where you go, yeah, it's what I did at the weekend. And it's interesting because I, part of what I do is do leadership training and consultancy. And you say to people, one of the things I always say is like, what's the most effective leadership method? And they come up with all those things. And I'll say, managing by walking about. And they're like, what does that mean? I said, well, you walk about and you just talk to people. And they're like, really? And I said, yes, because by the time I said, don't get the lift. By the time, walk through the office to get to where you're going and stop by and talk to people for 5 minutes. And you do that regularly enough, then people will come and tell you when there's issues. You don't need to go looking for them. And you'll be able to, I talk about it in my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. I talk about emotional awareness and having to be able to take a temperature check. So you should be able to walk through the office and sense from the environment and what you'll see going on, what's happening. An attuned leader should be able to do that instantly. You shouldn't be able to hit your office door without knowing where people are. Does that make sense? I mean, yes, sometimes I go into decent consultancy and I go early just to hang in the office. And when people come, you can actually give them a good description of just what's happening just by what you've observed in those few minutes. And I'm surprised that other people don't pick that up. Like, you could say, this office is too, this is an open plan office and it's too quiet. People are whispering on the phone and, I'm talking about not like HR departments or anything that needs sensitive information. You're saying, there's something that's not right because where's the buzz that you expect from an open plan office? This is a Monday morning and no one's asking about somebody's weekend. I mean, what's going on here? It doesn't feel right.
Yes.
And if you say to the manager, is this normal? And they're like, I don't know. Maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're the problem.
Yes. Okay.
So when you were growing up, were you known as somebody that was mega efficient?
That's a very, very good question. I was brought up by parents who are very organized and think that's maybe where I got my productivity bent from. I don't remember. I mean, that's the environment I grew up in. So I would want to say yes, because mom and dad required it. And so I think that's what got me into the productivity world. I never stopped and thought about that, but that's how I was raised. It was like everything had its place. We ate dinner at a certain time, the processes and, systems at my home. And so that's a very good question, because I think that's what gave me birth into this productivity thing I'm doing now.
So what was your career like? Because to do productivity, you've obviously fashioned your own career and market out of it, because it's a standalone product, as it were. So what made you get to that point?
To what point?
To the point where you can do productivity as a business.
Well, when I got fired from my job back in 2005, I didn't know what to do. So I became an entrepreneur, which led me to speaking, which led me to one of my coaches saying, when I couldn't figure out what to do with my what topic I was going to talk about, he said, well, why don't you talk about productivity? And I didn't know where that came from. So I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he goes, well, you're one of the most productive people I know. And I guess because I'm so naturally productive that I didn't realize I was being productive, because this is how I am every day. I mean, I'm shocked at number of people who don't get stuff done. I'm like, I don't understand it. I can't be lazy. So I think that it was just a natural evolution for me. Okay,
I think we're nearing the end, so I've got one more question for you. What is the one question you would have liked me to have asked you?
Oh, boy, that really makes man, smoke's coming out of my ears now. What is one question I wish you would have asked me? Here's one that I wish you would have asked me is, what is the biggest tip that people can do in order to limit the distractions on their phone? The first one I already gave you, which is turn off notifications. The other thing is turn off vibration mode, because a lot of people tell me, Mark, I do everything right. I put my phone on mute. I put it face down, but it's still bothering me. I'm like, yeah, because you left vibration mode on. And so as soon as you get a call, a text, a notification, the phone buzzes. And as soon as you hear that buzz, you might as well answer the phone at that point because you've already broken your distraction. You already broken your focus and concentration on me. So a lot of people don't think about it because when you get your phone, vibration mode is enabled. And people go, well, what if your phone's muted and you get a phone call and you miss it? Then I miss it. Okay. I'm not going to worry about it. But when I need to be undisturbed, like right now, my phone is muted. But if I get a phone call right now, the phone will just keep on ringing, but I won't know it because it's face down, it's muted, and the vibration's turned off. So please turn off vibration mode. It is going to give you so much peace. You'll wonder how you manage without it. You don't need vibration mode because when you put your phone in mute, you want to be left undisturbed. But if you leave vibration mode on, it's just as you might as well just leave the phone unmuted.
That makes perfect sense. Brilliant. I think we'll end there. So that was very interesting and really good conversation there, Mark. Would you come back again?
I would. I really appreciate you being invited me on the show. It was an absolute thrill to talk to another person from over the ocean there. And would you like to know where you can find out more about me?
Sure. Let us know.
The easiest way is not go to markstruczewski.com because you won't be able to find the website. Instead, go to mrproductivity.com. That's Mr. all spelled out. When you go to mrproductivity.com, it takes you to markstruczewski.com. And there you can find out about my coaching. You can even apply for a free 45-minute session with me. You can find out about my podcast. You can find out where I'm on social media. Everything you want to know about me and more is at mrproductivity.com.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Mark as much as I enjoyed having it. If you'd like to learn more about Mavericks and leadership, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, apply to join the Maverick Paradox exclusive Facebook group. And my website is maverickparadox.com. Find out how willful independence can ultimately change all our futures. Thanks again, and see you soon.